also called Cooneal or Cooneal, shaped here like a hook cut on. The road one way down, the railroad, the ancient railroad. Crossroads here to the south, and this is the Cooneal Road, and the one going up by the school, made since 1856 to 1900. The one goes on to Paddy Mulherrin. River runs down there. Town. The old road ran down there. Church, parochial house, school, pond, knuckle sergeant. And this road here now wasn't in, it was made since 1856, between 1856 and 1900. And the railway there. That's where the halfway house was, where Tom Mulherrin, the famous sculptor, had his shop. Or Cooneal or Cooneal in 1641 or thereabouts. It belonged to the Earl of Cork. It is marked as C on Petty's map. We'll have a look at that now. There we see the name of the parish, Ballyshikilly, and needle pointing to sea, where Cooneal would roughly have been, or had been, in those days. The other big area is Bog, B-O-G-G, belonged to the Earl of Cork. In 1838, Cooneal Corran was in existence, the new townland. O'Donovan states the meaning is uncertain. I think it means Neil's Bog, and the townland had the shape of a reaping hook, a Corran, and hence the corruption of the word Corran in English. It belonged to Colonel Gore of Ballysh Abbey. His agent was J. Gore, ESQ, Ballina. He was the man that would be collecting the rent for him. Tenants had it at 16 shillings an acre, and there were 55 families here. They were all Catholic except one family. The 1838 map shows 3 villages in the townland. Brennanstown, having about 8 houses, all Brennans I suppose, except maybe Gawans that was there. Knockashradeen, the town of the little street, it had 11 or 12 buildings. The remains of the houses are there today, but nobody's living in that village anymore. The pound was on the opposite side of the road. There were about 4 buildings where the present day Cooneal Corran village is today, and there were about 8 more buildings scattered throughout the townland, making a total of 31 or 32 as I count them on the map. If there were 55 families here, 23 of them were not charted on the map. Now we'll have a look at the O'Donovan's map of 1838, showing the old roads and the roads that are missing, and the road down by Brennanstown, which is not in use today. A new road has been made down there, and also the road from the Rabal Road up towards Cooneal School and past it and down to Listlinen. That wasn't there either. We'll have a look at it and see what the map looked like in 1838. 1838 map. Cooneal Corran having the same shape as it has today. The Killala Road. Somewhere around here the halfway houses. Tom Mulherrin is across the road here. The railway track isn't there because it wasn't in it at the time. Old road coming over to Cooneal goes on all the way. The new one isn't coming up here towards the shop. Knockashradeen here, and the pound. See them there. This is the village of Cooneal. It has no name. See the buildings there, the old road going way over towards Brennanstown. And coming out here at Gawans Gate, I think that was called. That road is in there today, and here there was a house here on the corner. I'm thinking that the Canon school may have been down here around Brennanstown. They were a very influential family in the townland in those days. Cooneal Corran of 1838. In 1856 the immediate lesser of the townland was John Knox. He owned about 704 acres of it. Charles McDonough owned the other 2 acres. The tenants of Townland occupiers were Bridget Gahan, Richard Mulherrin, Charles McDonough, Patrick McDonough, Dominic Philbin, Patrick Jennings, Winifred Rooney, Mary Jennings, John O'Boyle, John Welsh, Thomas Malloy, that's Tom Malloy the sculptor, I presume. I'm not too sure either. Patrick Gahan, Judith Mannion, Thomas Knight, and John Knox himself had about 170 acres of it. The tenants paid John Knox, and himself too, included paying himself, £194.15 for about 500, well, for the whole lot of it, 706 acres and 312 square patches. That was in 1856. Now after that, a lot of money must have been pumped here, because Brilliantstown disappeared. A new road was made. 2 new roads were made into Townland between that and 1901, between 1838 and 1901 after the famine. Now the road that goes up here is the road that divides Cooneal Moor on this side from Cooneal Coran on this side, and Cooneal Coran stretches away down there almost to Smiths, to where this river over here meets it, and where the little railway house was, and it stretches away over to the lake over there, and the lake was called Rathrooian Loch, and this is the Ballina-Killala road here, a busy road, and it goes way up there past the halfway house. Crossroads here. Cooneal Moor both sides of the road from here up. That's the Ballina road. Cooneal here both sides of the road. Cooneal Moor here both sides of the road. Most of it on the right hand side. Now most of Cooneal is on the right hand side here. Ballina-Killala road. We're up now to halfway house, or a public house, the front of the public house on the right. Now that's where Tom Malloy had his workshop, and he also had the pub around 1856. Craftsman, sculptor, here on the right hand side. Now I don't know who owned that shed on the left, it wasn't him. I thought it was at one stage, but it wasn't. Coming over here now, the Cooneal road. Cooneal both sides of the road here. Cooneal both sides of the road here. Boundary comes quite close to the left hand side here. There's a river that runs here on the left. Comes quite close to the this road is on the 1838 map. Wouldn't be as wide as this, but it nevertheless still here. The river here on the left is the boundary. Now that was a new road that was made from 1856 to 1900. This one here is an old road. The boundary is here. The left hand side of the road. This is the road going on to Ballybrunny. I think it's here. The river winds on there to the left. So that would be knocked off Townland out here. And Cooneal Coran over here. ASB power line is going down to a Saturday. It's a rough road, the first time I've ever travelled it. There are men working at the top. Annex. Bridge here, and another river here. Now Cooneal extends away back here until it meets the other river beyond. And then the boundary is right up to the road here. Cooneal on the right hand side of the road. The river here on the left boundary. Cooneal extends a bit further up there. Down ahead here, Cooneal both sides, townland, Cooneal Carn is Crossmolina. This would be it ahead here on the left where the bushes are. Not much of it there today. Some of the houses of Crossmolina. Now in here is the village of Crossmolina, the town of the street in there, and there's in 1838 there were 11 or 12 houses here in a bunch. Today there's not one living in it. There's the remains of one gable standing, and there are remains of a couple of gardens and maybe a lime kiln or something up there, and that's about it. On the other side of the road over here there was another house and the pound. Now Paddy Mulherrin of Cooneal tells me that this field over here was always called the pound field. And further over there is the school and the church, and this road here leads up to Ballybrunny, and this one here leads down to the Cooneal Listlinen road. Now we'll have a look at the remains of the old village up here, Crossmolina. Road down to Ballantine, and to the left over to Listlinen. Power lines coming over here to the side. School over here on the left. Mulherrin's in here. Oh, Paddy, the pound is in your land over there, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
And you were telling me that you think some relative of yours had it at one time.
Well, I cannot say was it a relative or not, but oh yes, the old woman that lived here had it.
Yeah.
So, and she gave it over to my grandfather.
Yeah, what was his name?
Paddy Mulherrin too.
Yeah, wasn't there a Richard back there somewhere?
There was no, but he was, I don't know, was he related at all to one the Richard I'm aware of?
Yeah.
That was down the way he lived here.
Yeah, well wasn't there a Richard way over there at Crossmolina or whatever you call it over the road there?
Well,
Paddy Dick.
oh yes, that's right.
His father, Paddy Mulherrin would be his name, wouldn't it?
Paddy Dick. Well,
It
Paddy,
would, yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
and his father then it'd be Richard, wouldn't it?
Well, it would appear that way when
Yeah.
he was Paddy Dick.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, it
yeah,
would appear that
yeah,
way.
yeah. You were telling me too over the pound there that you heard that there was an old she-bean, did you?
Oh yes, this little mud-walled house that's in the Poundry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I know that Henry girl told me one time that there was a sheep in he house.
That's
so
right, that's right. Now, your shed across the road here, which one of them there now?
That blue, the one with the blue door.
The one with the blue door down there.
Yeah.
History attached to that too, isn't there?
There is, well, Father, Mrs. Davis, she was teaching back in the old school behind.
Yeah.
And she used to come down from, what's the name of the place?
Knockmore.
No.
No.
Knocked up.
Knock.
Ratduff.
Ratduff. That's
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
Ratduff.
And
They put up the
Yeah,
horse then.
Tom Foodie. He's alive yet in Belnay above near the new chapel.
Yeah.
He used to come over here and he used to bring the pony and trap from behind at the school and
Leave it there.
house the pony there at 3 o'clock.
Yeah. So she came up and down with a pony and trap.
Yes, yes, and Father Davis along with her, the son.
Yeah, sitting in the trap.
In the trap, and it's here behind he was christened, Father Davis.
Was it?
Not christened, but
Baptized.
confirmed.
Confirmed, was it? Yeah, 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 yeah. You own the field there where the parochial house is built, the new one, and at the corner of the church beyond, don't you?
I do.
You were telling me about 3 old houses down there.
Oh yes, 3 below at the lower end.
One of them
was Egan's, who worked here in this place.
Yeah.
And one of them was Knight, who also worked here in this place at that time.
Did never hear of Thomas Knight? No.
Eh?
Thomas wasn't his
No,
name.
John Knight was Biddy Knight was the mother.
Yeah.
Name. And John Knight was the son.
Yeah.
And John Knight later went to
He later went to America, didn't he?
He did, and I don't know what became of him.
Never heard of him since.
But they used to keep a little shop behind there, Biddy Knight.
Yeah.
And when the railway ran there beyond first from Belnay to Killala, she used to go, well before that I think it was every Saturday or every Monday, I don't know which, into Belnay with her. She'd have 100 bag with her.
Yeah.
And she'd walk it in, and she'd walk it down again, or walk it home, and the bag full with stuff.
Where was the bag? On her back?
On her bag.
Oh.
Was this at the shop?
For the shop, yes.
Yeah. What was the name again?
Biddy Knight.
Biddy Knight. Oh, yeah. Oh, well, there were hard times in those days,
There
wasn't
were,
there?
and there were hard
There was no
people too.
supermarket in those days.
There wasn't.
But after the train ran there beyond, she wouldn't go if she won the sweep if it was going in
She
the
was
day.
afraid of the train.
She got afraid of the train.
Is that so?
That's a fact. Never went to Belnay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Your big house there, Paddy, isn't it? A good 2-story. How many years do you say you were telling me there it was built?
Well, about 63.
63.
63.
And the builder was...
Pat went to the Killala, and Jack Welch from Killala.
Yeah.
A helper that went
Yeah,
to that.
yeah, yeah. They built a 2-story at the time, didn't
They
they?
did. And that was the second 2-story ever they built. The first one was where Tommy Fraser left
Tommy
below.
Fraser.
Yeah. They built the parochial house in Killala too, you know.
Did they?
They did indeed.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Oh, Pat went to turn out a big builder.
Yeah.
After
The
doing
Georgia
that
church
house.
as well.
Did they?
He did.
Oh, yeah.
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 I remember, that's the old house where I was born in, would you believe
Which
it?
one?
That's
The shed here.
that old shed,
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
thatched out. That was there was 2 chimneys on it. I
Oh.
remember the night we left that house on a Christmas Eve night,
How long
and
ago?
we went into the new one. Oh, that's 63 years.
You have a good memory.
63.
You
I was only about 5 or 6 years. I
Well,
wasn't
you're
going.
not that old now, are you?
Now that there was the church, and that wall coming over there is the boundary between Cooneal Moor and Cooneal Corran. Corran on this side over here. And inside this bush here in the corner was the old house that Paddy Mulherrin talked about there a short time ago. Biddy Knight. She was supposed to have a small shop here the time that the railway was working between Ballina and Killala. The old road went in here. And out Middeners and away out at Brenstown. This one here is a new one, made around before the 1900s. Now behind me here is what's called Gaughan's Gate, and this is part of the road that led into Brenstown. Now in 1838 there were 8 or 9 houses here. There are no houses here today. And through Gaughan's Gate. Now in the background up here may have been what's described as Carran School or Carran School. A female school established around 1850, row number 6416. One schoolroom, 24 feet by 11 feet, walls 7 feet high, 2 tables, 4 forums, and the teacher was Harriet Deblu Kluski, 21 years old. She had 40 pupils, and although it was a female school, there were 19 males and 21 females, and the hours were between 10 o'clock and 3. And under the management of Reverend Thomas Timlin, who was the parish priest. Now it was supposed to be 1.5 miles from Cooneal and 2.5 from Listlinen and 1.5 miles from Reserk. And it was supposed to be erected by private funds, and a dwelling house was joined to the school, but no communication between them. Yeah. I'm not sure, but I think maybe it might have been here. Well, the school wasn't there. It was up near where O'Boyle's shop is today. I found out from the roll number. Now this is down at Reserk, and the railway ran down here. There's the track of the Killala-Ballina Railway. And this road down here was made in 1838. And there's the railway house, one of the cottages around Cooneal. Now this here is the Reserk Road, and that was the railway that ran from Ballina down to Killala, and that there was one of the gatehouses that was operated by a John Egan between 1890, I suppose, and 1930. Now the old Killala Railway ran through this town and from Ballina down to Killala. It lasted from about 1890 to 1933. It was called the Midland and Great Western Railway. Later it was taken over by the Great Southern and finally CIE. They pulled wagons of cattle, pigs, rabbits and mackerel, corn, wheat, sugar, flour, coal and other goods up and down. There were 5 gatehouses on the way down at the level crossings. They had Sunday specials to bring footballers up and down to matches. Pat Robinson, the famous Lacan footballer, travelled many times on this train. John Egan was the man, the railway gatekeeper here, and he also worked on the railway lines. The house is still inhabited. And there were 5 of these on the way down to Killala. Crossroads, Reserk, and the halfway house. First owned by Tom Malloy. Now, some people think he owns this, but he never did. That was belonged to Peter O'Hora. And he had a workshop on this near end of it. And down there would be the kitchen door, and nearest to the kitchen would be the pub. And up here was the workshop, and overhead he had a loft for his tools. Tom Malloy. Later owned by Martin Gallagher. And then by Patrick Gallagher. Halfway house. You were Jimmy Smith and Hugh Golden, is that right? Jack Golden, yeah. And from you got all this information. You were telling me there that about the old Gallagher pub up there that was once owned by Tom Malloy.
Tom Malloy.
Yeah. And
that's the man that's below in Crossmolina, buried, you know what the...
Indeed, where the headstone is.
Aye,
yeah.
And there was a saying one time that he buttoned. He offered a lot of money, £100 that time was a lot of money, for someone to button the other button.
The lower button of the coat, that's right.
It couldn't be done. There was a lot of people came, but they couldn't button the door.
Indeed. Now, you were telling me there where the pub was. It was the nearest room to somewhere or another.
To the kitchen.
Yeah.
The kitchen. I think that's what the pub was. The workshop then was where the bear is now, where the bear was when it was oceans.
Yeah.
And there was it was a 2-story building. There was a loft over it.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't all a 2-story building, was it?
No.
Just the end near the crossroads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was building. No.
So Tom Malloy was the man that was the sculptor there.
He was.
And he didn't work the other side of the road.
No.
Peter O'Hora.
No, I don't think so. That was a farmhouse.
Yeah, belonged to Peter O'Hora.
It's a Peter O'Hora.
Yeah. After him then came, which of the Gallaghers?
Yes.
Martin.
Martin was the
father.
He lived there beyond.
Yeah.
Yes, he was the...
Was the last man.
Aye.
But before him would be Martin, wouldn't it?
Yeah, Martin was the first man.
Would you think he'd be the next owner after Tom Malloy?
Ah, he was.
He was, yeah, yeah. And they continued on the pub then, didn't they?
Oh, they did.
They did,
They
until
did.
about, Patrick continued on, but when he died.
He did.
When would that
Was
be?
she-
You telling me around 1950? 50?
Well, he didn't die, no, but he was an artist.
Oh, yeah. Well, he
She
wasn't
carried on herself and the
She
daughter.
did a while after.
She did.
Yeah.
Was,
Then she died and the daughter had it, like she was
was
only
after
daughter.
him going away too, the probably used to be.
Oh, they used to. Oh, they
And it
used.
might be carried on to 19...
55.
65 maybe.
Shit. Would it?
No, I'd say 50.
Yeah. Did you ever drink in it?
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, yes, I did. And there used to be a great crack in it. And Professor Mulherrin of the college used to come down to it.
Used to.
For the pure
Drop.
listening to them.
Was it?
It was mostly listening. Now, he used to like it
The
really.
conversation.
The carry on date and I would be pulling it, you know.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Himself and Vince Carroll used to come down.
Yeah.
And he'd be there checking us.
Tell me,
You know.
what kind of drink would you get right now? Was it bottled stuff?
But sometimes we bad.
Oh, the wood.
Whiskey.
And
What's
whiskey, oh, the wood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, they were well stocked up, so.
Oh,
Ah, the
oh,
way-
it's all
oh,
one.
God, I've
Yeah.
seen any amount.
Yeah. And they used to cover the halfway house.
They used.
Yeah.
It started to dwindle away, then there wouldn't be much drink, you know.
Yeah.
When he
That
went
was,
away.
yeah, that was the time before the cars, wasn't it?
Twice.
Horses and carts and
Ah,
tractors.
Well,
the
there was.
cats and
The
bicycles.
cars were not
Pulling up
care.
there.
The being
Oh,
not
the big
care.
thing
Yeah,
was
yeah,
the late years there was
Yeah.
something, yeah.
The ways.
yeah. Well, you knew of a man that knew old Tom Malloy, didn't you?
I knew something. I knew him.
Is that so?
Aye.
Well, you were telling me about Hugh Mahan there. He was
Aye,
there.
yeah,
Yeah,
he knew.
yeah. Yes, there's great talk about that fella, you know, Tom Malloy. Some of it isn't true. Some people thought that he had his workshop the far side of the road.
Aye, that's
Oh, yeah,
right, that's right.
And that he was, he got some prize for the Queen of England for something or another.
I think that was right.
He got
I heard that
something,
too.
he got
Did you hear
that.
anything about it?
Aye,
I did.
chair, folding chair.
Was it?
Aye,
Aye.
something like
He was
that.
supposed to get his license, he got a free license while he lived, and his license could never be endorsed.
That's right.
Good man yourself. From royalty in England.
Aye,
Well,
must be
they
that.
they owned this country
Was it
that time.
Victoria?
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Now, Tom Malloy, that we had been talking about, had land here in 1856, according to the Griffith valuation. And Queen Victoria was the queen in question. And her jubilee, 50 years after of her accession to the throne, was in 1887. So we presume it would be around that time that he submitted his entry or his work of art to the Queen of England and got whatever awards he did around 1887 or 1888. Now that there's a picture of the old parochial house. Now the residence of J. Collins, who works in the Labour Exchange in Ballina. It was built around 1891, between 1891 and 1900. Canon Michael of Killala has the priest that lived here listed as Father Corran, Father Doherty, Father O'Hara. Well, he came from Blacken. Father Maloney, Father Willie Heaven, and the last man to be here was Canon P. Davis. He died around the 1980s or thereabout. That was the old parochial house. Scarlett Park, Scarlett into Cooneal, 1940. Now that was the picture there of Cooneal National School. The stone there shows that it was built in 1940. It was only a two-teacher school then, and it looked somewhat like this, an old picture. This was taken in 1967. It was only half the size it is now. From here on, it was made bigger, but this is what it looked like. And down here's another picture of the same thing. Two-teacher school. It was three-teacher, I think, in 1967, but it had only 2 rooms. Now, Patrick Timlin was the principal then. Now, he taught in the old school, and he taught along with Mrs. Catherine Ennis. Now, this school was opened up in about 1941, and the roll number was 17209. Now, after that came Michael Miles, who started here on the 14th of April 1942, and he was here until the year 1949. Finan Burke came here then, and he was here from the 9th of January 1950 until the 21st of October 1953. Seamus Munley started here on the 22nd of October 1953, and he was here for a few years. Now, Eileen Lawler from down Derrines was here as principal from about 1956 to 1958. She left then to become principal of Ballymacahola School, which became a one-teacher school. I came here then in September of 1958 and have been here since then. Now, other teachers here were Anne Loftus of Ballina, now Mrs. Eddie Malloy. She was here from the 1st of October 1964 to the 31st of March 1977. Mary Lavin, now Mrs. McAndrew, was here from 1964 to about 1975. Mary Kelly of Lord Edward Street, Ballina, started here on the 13th of June 1977. She had a BA degree from Galway University and did a year in the training college at St. Patrick's, Drumcondra. And she is now Mrs. Mary O'Toole, and she is still here. Now, Breda Clark of Rabel came to school here in the early 60s and got on the staff here around 1975, and she is still here. Now, subs that operated here were Mrs. P. Lavin of Clonalhan in 1977, Mona Jackson of Ballina, 1980, Jacqueline Munley of Killala, 1983, Liz Ann Davis of Ballina, 1983. She was a relative of Canon Davis. Mrs. Grace Munley of Killala was here in 1983 doing sub. Margaret McHale of our class 1984, and there was a Mary Berkeley also of Ballina. Now, the big extension was put onto the school around 1969-1970, and Ballymacahola School was amalgamated with it. And it only cost the parish about £400, I think, due to the Trojan work of Reverend Canon Davis at the time, who was constantly up and down to the department. And he gave them a piece of this parochial land too, as an extension for the yard. And I think the 2 rooms and toilets and whatever that were added on only cost about 15,000 in those days. Today, 1 room would cost about that. But this amalgamation took place around 1969-1970, and a bus service was established from Ballymacahola and from the other areas, taking the children in here. And this was mostly due to the efforts of Reverend Canon Davis of the day. That there is the earlier picture that didn't come out, showing the extent of the school. It's only half the size it is today. 1967. And the later one of the same thing. There's a picture showing 2 of the staff, Mrs. Winters and Breda Clark, during the lunchtime break. Another one here. And Jacqueline Munley of Tillala. It's another one there in 1983, showing some of the Cooneal artwork. There's a picture of another one of the staff taken in 1979, Mary Kelly, now Mrs. O'Toole. And that's one of myself taken at the job by a Belgian, somebody from Belgium in 1983. The Belgian's name was Timmerman, and Cooneal has been a 4 teacher since 1970 or thereabouts, since the time of the amalgamation. This here is the Reverend Canon Davis. This photograph was taken in 1969 at a Cooneal pioneer dinner in the downhill, I think. And he was the man that was responsible for a lot of the school development and the amalgamation and a lot of improvements done around the present day Cooneal School. There's Tony Hegarty, Mary Clark, who has become Mrs. Gillivari, and I think I was the secretary of the Pioneer Association. That was in 1969. The Reverend Canon Willie Davis. That there was a photograph of myself holding one of his dogs, taken inside in his vegetable garden around 1969. He was particularly fond of boxers. This one I think was called after world heavyweight Cassius Clay. He used to call him Clay, and he had another one later on, Sonny Liston. And we see how he had his vegetable garden done out there in strips with chunks of pine trees. Great man for the garden and working around the garden. Now, Paddy, you were telling me there about the old the Calvary over the road there. You were on the erection of that, weren't you?
Yes, I was. In fact, I gave a helping hand there too.
Yeah.
Michael Goulan
Was the contractor?
that done this house here.
Was it?
behind you.
Yeah.
That was the old house where we lived in first. It was
Yeah.
a thatched house, but
Yeah.
I got Michael Goulan to re-roof it and put on aluminium. So
Oh, yeah.
done a big job on it.
Where did he live now?
Over here in Reserve beyond.
Yeah. What house would be near him today now?
The Knights over there.
Oh, yeah.
The Knights.
Paddy Knight, is it?
And Smith, Sonny Smith, you know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know him indeed. Yeah. Well, anyway, you gave the site for this
I did.
Calvary over
I
here.
did.
Around the 1950s.
Around the 1950s.
Yeah. And it was old Canon Heaven that got
It was Canon Heaven that was here at that time. And I don't know, he wasn't, I don't know was he Canon that time, but
Yeah. Well, he was here
he
anyway.
happened to be later.
Yeah. You don't know where they bought the cross and the figures from and that?
Well, I'm not so sure now about that, and I
Yeah.
should know it.
Yeah, yeah.
So I should.
Did any special man erect it, or did Golden do it himself?
Golden done it himself. He got a business to hang it, lift it up,
Oh, yeah.
Let
It's
it
block
down.
and tackle or
let it
something.
down with cement, and
Yeah,
propped it until it was set.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Never stirred since.
Yeah.
Well, that was the whole year now that went up.
That went up. Yeah.
Oh, that's why it went up too.
Yeah.
He,
No,
went
you
on-
have a son here, the second son, I think, Joseph, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. He went. He was interested in having a break from home for a few months.
Well, he was involved in marketing the farm.
Oh,
wasn't
he was very much, and he seen an advertisement on this about the student exchange business.
Yeah.
So he applied, and he had to go through a few tests
Yeah.
to get accepted. So he was
Yeah.
accepted, and for 6 months. And
Yeah.
he applied first to get into a dairy farm, but that wasn't available at the
Yeah.
time. And he was put onto this farm in Canada, Alberta,
Yeah.
12 miles from Calgary, the
Yeah.
town or city that's there.
Yeah.
And in the program was included a 3 weeks tour of the United States.
Yeah.
So,
He's at present out there now, isn't he?
no, he has the tour finished and he's back in Canada with his employer again.
Yeah. Well, when did he go to Canada now? This year?
When did he go to Canada?
Yeah.
Well, he left here on the 15th of April.
Last.
Yes.
And he's due home
And
around.
he's due home, I think, around the 26th of October.
Ah.
And I think it's 4 more from Ireland now that went with him at that time. But there was other fellas in from other countries, say Sweden, Holland,
Oh, indeed.
those places.
Indeed.
They all met. They were all to board the plane at Heathrow Airport in
Yeah.
London.
Yeah. Well, now, he was on television a year or two ago, or maybe a few years ago, in connection with the
This
progress he has done here, wasn't it?
yes, wrote this building here beyond,
Yeah.
the Splattered House.
Oh, yeah.
We had that Barry Cowan here.
Yeah.
He was, and
7 days. He was on 7 days at the
He
time.
was.
Yeah.
He was.
Yeah. Yeah.
He came here along with, I don't know, there was 2 or 3 other fellas.
Yeah.
They talked to him just like you're talking to me now.
Yeah, and he was into silage business in those days, wasn't he?
He was. Yeah.
And
We
the-
had the house just finished at that time, and
Yeah.
stocking it up with cows
Yeah.
but,
Yeah. And well, that appeared on RTE, didn't it?
it did.
Yeah.
It did. There was a sketch yard on it.
You don't remember the year or the time, you don't?
Well, I could give a good shot to it. So this is 85.
Yeah.
I'd say we set for around 1980.
Around 1980.
Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be the time that Father Davis died over here, around that time, wouldn't it? Before.
Father Davis is dead. I think Father Curry was telling me he was here. It's 6 years now.
Yeah, must be 79, so.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So you have another exchange student here in his place, haven't you?
Well, I didn't get hurt through the exchange.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
Yeah.
It's from the Mayo Farm Relief Service.
Oh, yeah.
And when I'm paying her now, I don't pay her at all. I send a cheque onto his Hanley in Claremorris.
Oh, yeah.
And Hanley sends it from there to Tipperary.
Yeah.
Until there's tax and one thing deducted out of it.
And then it
And
comes up
she'll get her quota then.
eventually.
Whatever is left out of it.
It's
What you do with
unusual.
it?
Yeah, it's unusual that you have a woman doing this now and this.
Well, that's right, it is. And first and foremost, I was very slow, I thought, to accept her that
Yeah. Shouldn't be able to do a man's
I was
work.
wondering what was going to happen.
Yeah.
That's I often found.
Yeah.
I often found fellas, not to mind girls, very awkward in working with them,
Indeed,
dealing
indeed,
with
indeed,
them,
indeed.
satisfying them, but sure we had to chance her anyhow.
Yeah.
and
Well, she has proved
she has proved very,
able enough.
very good, she had.
Yeah,
But of late, I
Oh, indeed,
bit of a road.
indeed, indeed.
She wants her head.
That there is a picture of Joseph Mulherrin of Cooneal. Joseph Mulherrin went to Cooneal National School, and then he went on to St Muradix, and from there he went on to Mountbellew Agricultural College. He was a member of Machran na Ferma and took advantage of agricultural grants and advice to modernise the present-day Mulherrin Farm. Through the International Agricultural Exchange Association, he acquired a 6-month exchange experience in Canada, where he is now. And that's what his father there, Paddy Mulherrin, was talking about. Now, in his absence is Barbara McNally, who was taking over the job of running the farm while he's away. And there's a picture of Barbara McNally pictured working on the Mulherrin farm in Cooneal in the Western People of May the 22nd, 1985. An exchange student on the Cooneal farm doing farm chores. Barbara McNally, 22 years old, a graduate of Mountbellew and Multifarnham Agricultural Colleges. The paper, Western People, from which I got this information, describes her as one of a family of 9 from Ballintubber. Before coming to Cooneal, she managed a dairy farm in Wexford. She travels up and down from Ballintubber to Cooneal each day in that blue Renault we saw parked outside the Mulherrin home. She starts work at 7 a.m. and finishes at 6 p.m. and she is here at present in Cooneal for 7 months in exchange for Joseph, who was away out in Canada at the present time. Barbara McNally, pictured working on the Mulherrin farm in Cooneal. Some kind of water tanks. Canon Davis. He was born in Ratduff in 1907. His mother was his teacher. John Loftus told me that her name was Turnbull. I haven't found that out yet. She taught in the Old National School in Cooneal Moor, where O'Boyle's shop is today, or at the back of it. She travelled down to Cooneal School by means of a pony and trap. She stabled the pony at Paddy Mulherrin's shed, still standing today. She brought Canon Patrick Willie Davis down with her to school. He wasn't called Canon then, he was called Willie Davis. And this is what the old school register of 1910 shows. Here we see his name, Willie Davis. The year 1910. Date of entrance, March the 11th, 1910. 3 years at the time. And his parents, farmer and teacher. Right up. He was only 3 years at the time, and he had to spend 3 years in infants. He was too young to enter first class. He stayed down here until the 1st of January 1916. By then he was in 3rd class. I do not know when he finished the rest of his schooling, but he was ordained in Maynooth around 1932. He served as a curate in England, Gisala and Crossmolina, and then he came to Cooneal as parish priest in the year 1963, and he stayed down there until his health failed and he died in 1979, January. He is buried in the church grounds. Now, he was a great man for the parish of Cooneal and did not spare himself. He was chairman of the North Mayo GAA board from as far back as I can remember. It's likely I'll be able to find dates on that from people who knew him later on. And he held the post until the late 1970s. He played golf. he told me. And he also told me that he won many prizes, or a few prizes at least, down on Ross's Point. He was sorely missed out of Crossmolina when he left and came down here to Cooneal. He was fond of dogs, especially boxers, and he named them after world heavyweight champions, such as Sonny Liston and Cassius Clay. And we have here a picture of one of them. I think it's Sonny Liston. Now, that's me there holding Sonny Liston around the 1960s, I think. And we can see in the background there posts. He worked hard too as a gardener around the house. He was all the time using a spade or a lawnmower or working in the garden. He got a big extension built to Cooneal National School around the years 1969-70. That was about the year that we were amalgamated with Ballymacnahola. Had a cost of about £15,000. It only cost the parish about 400 at the time. He gave away parochial land and saved the parishioners' expense. His people were wealthy and owned a lot of property in Crossmolina and some in Ballina. The name survives even today in Crossmolina on stores. They owned the railway bar across from the railway station in Ballina. I think it is named the Coach and Horses or the Coach Inn or some other name today. He was paid an allowance from the property of his people until the late 70s, so he didn't depend on the people of Cooneal for his existence. He rarely talked about money from the altar, an unusual quality in the clergyman of today. He was involved in the National Farmers Association or organisation and in the Mart in Ballina. He held some position there. I don't exactly know what it was. He was involved in the welfare of the area and created an uproar about the bad state of the Mullafari roads, I think around the 60s. They were improved and tarred later on. Now, he was much criticised for this by the paper and politicians, and also a reverend clergyman called Kilfeather, T.P. He was also at variance with the Minister for Education about the bus service and about improvements around the school, and he told me on one occasion that the Minister threatened to report him to the Bishop and have him fired if possible. He was tireless in his efforts and was gone nearly every night attending GAA meetings or NFA meetings. His health could not last the pace, so he suffered a series of strokes and he died in January of 1979. Now we intend to look at his place of birth. I believe there are some people living here today in Arda, and also some of the friends he had around Crossmolina. Canon Davis, born 1970. And this is Ratduff Church. And there's the small house where Canon David was born in 1970 and travelled down to the old school in Cooneal. His mother was a teacher, her name was Turnbull. Well, that's the owner of it. He's a man from Eshmer, I think. It's old house. Now, Tony Donoghue, you were telling me there that you had long associations with Father Davis in the early days of the National Farmers Association.
Well, I had, from about 1955. The first he came up here organising branches of the NFA at that time, and very soon afterwards, of course, he was deeply involved in Mochar-na-Ferma before that.
Yeah.
He had established a branch of Mochar-na-Ferma, and as you know, the NFA developed from Mochar-na-Ferma. Mochar-na-Ferma was more of a social and a cultural organisation,
Yeah.
and at the time they began to realise that something or more lines of developing farming as an industry was needed. And a group in Dublin established the NFA. Father Davis continued forming branches, and he formed a branch in Crossmolina, and he came up to Kilmurray to form another one. And that's how I met him.
Oh,
now,
yeah.
I hadn't been involved in Mochar-na-Ferma.
When do you think now that was when he
That
formed?
was in 1955.
Oh, yeah.
And we went to a few meetings into Castlebar, and we established a county executive. And at that time, the two prime movers were Peter Tunney of Killawalla, Westport, and Michael Joyce of Hazel Rock, also Westport. Now Michael Joyce was a farmer, and he was also he was a civil servant as well. He worked in the Labour Exchange in Westport. And he became the secretary, and Peter Tunney became the chairman. And Father Davis was the president. And from that forth, we worked away until we decided it was necessary to form a North Mayo Regional Executive of the NFA. And that in time, Joe O'Neill became the chairman, and not just because I was secretary of it, and it isn't just now because I was involved in it, but it became, of its type, the best pressure group in Ireland at that time.
Pressurising the ministers and the Minister for Agriculture.
Yes,
and
the county agricultural officer would consult us on many things at that time, and various people like that.
Now, he was he president of that for years? He
was president all the time, yes.
Until
for years and years, and he was the power behind the throne, or behind the whole organisation. He was the man with the power to push these things forward. Of course, you see, he was in his way a bit of a steamroller. You know, he was. If a thing had to be done, it was done, no matter what weapons were available. And it's hard to realise now how bad the situation was that time. Do you know?
Oh, he was a good man and a hard worker, wasn't he?
Yes, he apart from his clerical duties, he devoted all his time and, I might say, his money to the whole development of the farmers' union.
Yeah, all around. He'd be president of that until the late 70s, would he?
No, he wasn't. No. You see, before that, as you know, and during part of the early years, he was very much involved in the GAA. He was. And actually what happened, something else diverted his direct attention from the NFA. As I might say in passing, he was the county representative in Dublin on the council of the NFA as well, for years. And all that time he never drew any expenses or anything. It was all out of his own pocket to go to Dublin.
That's right.
But what actually happened was the MART system began to establish itself in Ireland. And by 1958 or so, the end of 1958, we realised there was MARTs in the north, south, east, but there was none in the west. And actually, I was the first one that promoted the idea of a mart for Ballinair. There was one already established by Dunleavy brothers. They were Americans.
That's right.
They were great men, but they were before their time. And unfortunately, in the West, you know, there was a lot of a traditional stick and dog type of dealer.
Well, yeah. Well, they were onto the fairs. They didn't want to.
Yes, they were against the marts because these part-time jobbers wouldn't have the opportunity to
make money like they were.
Take advantage of people that didn't know the business. So there was, of course, the shippers themselves too boycotted the marts in the West.
Did they?
But anyway, by 1959 we had decided to buy Dunleavy's out. Dunleavy's wasn't doing so good, despite the fact that I kept preaching all the time that farmers should go in. But the difficulty was, excuse me, it was hard for the farmers to go in when the dealers were boycotting the sales, you see. So eventually we decided to buy the mart from the Dunleavy brothers. And well, mostly you know now what happened. But it was a long struggle. We had to fight that boycott all the time. We had to fight peaks and valleys in the cattle trade. And of course all these things were taken advantage of by the dealers. And dealers would go around and buy cattle before the sales. Actually, they were doing it, buying cattle before the day of the fair too. And as it was, the fairs were on the way out to a great extent in the West because they were going around poaching
Oh,
the
indeed,
cattle
indeed.
a few days before. But that distracted Father Davis's complete concentration from the NFA.
Yeah.
Will you knock it off for one second? The trouble is when I talk much,
So now, would you think that Father Davis's aims were like to make the farmers around the area more prosperous? That's the reason that he
that
had.
was his chief aim in life.
Yeah.
That the farmers would be better off financially through this organised selling of cattle in the market,
Yeah.
sold by auction. The majority of the farmers, the small farmers, well, we'd have the 7 to 10 or 12 cattle per year. They wouldn't go to the fair only once or twice. They went out there, they didn't know what the situation was or how cattle were going, and they chanced it at them. And a lot of them thought they were knowledgeable about the price of cattle, but how could they know the weight of them?
Yeah.
You know, to appearances, you know, you could be out 100 weight in cattle.
Indeed. So, you think he brought prosperity to the farmers of the
Oh,
West?
there's no doubt about it. And I'm not being biased about this now because I knew him so well.
Yeah.
I know that for a fact.
Yeah. And would you think there would be any mark there only for his efforts?
Well now, there may have been a mark.
Yeah. Well, there was one there already.
There was one there already, not doing so good.
Yeah.
But in my estimation, it wouldn't be in the position it is today, but for him.
And his efforts.
For his efforts.
Yeah. You were telling me that he got good coverage from the Western people or the press during what years now?
Well, the Western people now and the Connacht Telegraph, they were very generous.
That was Tony Donoghue there talking about Canon Davis and his work on the map. They got coverage in the 50s, and here is Canon Davis at Mary Clark's wedding in the early 70s or late 60s outside the Downhill Hotel in Ballina. John Murphy. He was well able to walk and run there. This was taken from an 8mm film I took at the time from a movie camera. And here we see him again. Reverend Canon Willie Davis. Now you're telling me that you live here in Crossmolina for since 1947. Yeah, and you remember Canon Davis here as a curate?
Quite well, yes.
Yeah. Was he here before your time?
He was, yes. A few years before I came here, he moved in here.
Yeah, and he got into a lot of things, didn't he?
Well, he was in everything that was good for the community.
Yeah.
He was a great man to get things done.
Yeah.
I think his first effort was a billiard hall to keep them off the street.
The young people occupied.
Keep the young people occupied.
Yeah.
And, the next thing that he tackled was the dance hall right beside the billiard hall.
Yeah. Now, was this billiard hall somewhere near the dance hall?
It's right beside it, and it's right beside the church.
Oh, yeah.
Right beside the Catholic church.
Had he these gone now before you came here, before 1947?
Pardon?
Had he these, the billiard hall in operation?
It was being used at, it was sited in the old, what's the dance hall now, and a portion of that.
Yeah.
And it got a bit, he decided then that there's do something about the dance hall, that there was a need for it, it was too small, and they decided to build they were going to build everything under the one roof, and the late Bishop Nocton wouldn't allow it. He wouldn't allow the the financial commitment to do that.
Oh, yeah.
And we were, Mickey Lynn, who was, he died after us, so he was an engineer with the Board of Works, brother of Dr. Millen College, president of the college.
Yes, indeed.
He had drawn up a composite plan that would have everything under the one roof, the dance hall and the billiard room and a social centre and all. And the overall cost of it was about £4,000. And the bishop
You wouldn't allow it?
wouldn't sanction it.
Yeah.
So we had to scrap it and do it in piecemeal then. And the billiard room was the most important thing at that time to get that going, because it was going well, there was an interest in it.
Yeah.
Got that going, and after a while then decided to tackle the hall, and we had all sorts of schemes going to get money for it.
Yeah. Can you remember what years would that be now? Would it be in the 40s or the 50s?
Yeah, it'll be about, it'll be in the 50s.
Yeah.
Be in the early 50s.
Ah, yeah. And then that was going pretty well after a while, wasn't it, at the dance hall?
It was going well until up to a few years ago when the dancing.
When they changed over to...
The chain went over to discos.
Right, right.
And, the fact that there's no license attached to it, there's no drink available at the disco, is that the discos didn't go well in the hall at all.
Oh, yeah.
Because they go in the place where they have access to drink, which is
Yeah.
very, very wrong.
Oh, indeed. Community centres and
But,
whatever.
still, it's coming back again now. The run of disco here, Father Kelly runs a disco here, and it's going fairly well now.
Then he got into the Pioneers too, didn't he?
He resurrected the Pioneers. There weren't sunken alcohol or anything like that, but the numbers were very few, and we got it going. And,
Yeah.
he used to run outings for them too. An outing every year and have a dance to cover the expenses
Yeah.
of that. And
Where did you usually go to?
organise it. Well,
Butlins?
I went to Bundoran one time. I went to Galway, and I went to Dublin on one occasion.
Yeah.
I forget that. That's all I can remember.
Yeah. Would you have just one coach, or would there be a few coaches going together?
Well, I think two was about the most. That's
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
roast.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's a bit in the doldrums at the moment.
Oh, yeah,
but
yeah. Yeah. Well, when did he get these going? Around the 40s too, was it?
That would be around the. Well, it would be in the late 40s, the early 50s.
Yeah.
Around that period, like
Oh, yeah.
from between 1945 and say 55. There's a lot of activity. That's most of it. Activity then.
Yeah.
Then of course he was involved in the GAA.
He was indeed.
He was chairman. That'll be a different from here. But he was chairman of the county board while he was here.
Was it the North Mayo board now? Was
the
it?
North Mayo board.
Yeah. Yeah. And they used to hold the meetings up here in Crossmolina.
They held the meetings here in the
Yeah.
hall.
Yeah.
Yes.
He held that, I think, up until the 70s, didn't he?
I don't know what the date is now.
Yeah, no, I don't know either. I thought you might.
Bad on
Yes,
dates.
yeah.
Bad on dates.
Yeah. You were telling me that he did a lot for the club in Crossmolina too while he was
He
here.
did. He was very interested, and he started a tennis club here too, but it fell asunder.
Yeah.
With two fine grass courts over there, just beside where the football field is now.
Yeah.
But they fell away for lack of interest in it, like, you know.
Indeed. Well, it's a hard game to play too, you know, to get that touch, isn't it?
Well, mind you, we're able to
Oh,
keep
indeed.
it going and supply them with rackets and with balls, and for about 10 bob a year.
Is that so?
It was unsubsidised, of course.
Indeed,
You know, it
indeed,
was,
indeed.
Like he was behind it. We run a dance for that, you know, and it'll be done under some other body,
Yeah.
some other functions.
Indeed. Well, he always made money on the dances here, did he?
Oh, he did, yes. Oh, he did.
I often saw him on the door there too, you know.
Oh, he kept a strict eye on us.
He did,
Kept a
indeed,
strict
yeah.
eye on us altogether.
Bouncing a nod, you know, a fella that didn't behave himself now and again. I saw him at work too, didn't he do it? He did?
Oh yes, well, there were fellas barred from it.
That's right,
Oh
yeah.
yes, I had fellas barred for misbehaving, you know.
Oh, indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, and some of them, as a matter of fact, became stalwarts of community effort afterwards.
Oh, indeed, oh, indeed. I want a few points taken, you know.
They
and,
learned
yeah.
their lesson
Yeah,
out. Like
yeah.
the drink is in, the wit is out, so to say.
Yeah, but he personally took part in the action himself. I saw him there one night.
Oh no, yes.
He did.
Oh yes.
What did he do for the football club here? They had just a junior team, had they, when he came?
Well, they had a junior team, a junior. We uplifted them through into the intermediate.
Yeah.
They never made senior.
Did they? No. Yeah. So you were telling me there about he had some difficulty with pitches and fields and football fields and trying to acquire them from.
Oh yes, that was about 1946, 47.
Yeah.
That's the GA. They hadn't any money.
Yeah.
They couldn't afford to pay the rent of the field, which was I think around about £30 a year.
Yeah.
And that was settled up anyway.
Yeah. Well, would that field be in the same position as the present day
Exactly the same.
St. Tiernan's
Exactly the
Park?
same.
Yeah.
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 I bought that for £3,500.
Yeah. Yeah. And
About the late 50s,
Yeah.
early 60s.
he was gone before.
Oh, he was gone before that happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was gone before that happened.
So Father Davis, he was fairly well liked and sorely missed when he left here, would you say?
Oh, did he was, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he was a good man, and it took a while to get somebody to replace him as far as the community were concerned, you know.
Yeah.
He was all for amenities for the community,
That's right.
as well as having a deep religious. He looked after his religious duties very, very, very well, you know.
Yeah. Oh, he'd be always there on time and he'd attend to his duties.
And if there was a football match in Dublin, he'd have a mass at 6 o'clock or 6:30 in the morning for those that would be going to the football match. Of course, he'd be going himself.
That's right, to suit the footballers.
It might be said in the convent, it might be said in the cathedral in Ballinar, it might be said up here and there.
Yeah.
But usually it was in the convent. It was convenient there.
Yeah.
And sometimes he was hard pushed to it, and he'd say it on the road, get some chapel on the road.
On the way to the match.
On the way,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
he'd have the mass anyway.
Yeah. So a good man for the community.
Oh, good man, very good man for the community, and the youth. He was very, very interested in the youth.
Yeah.
He was hurling and camogie too. He took a great interest in it, but they didn't make much progress until the convent took up camogie then, and
Yeah.
there was a teacher then, but she's gone out to New Zealand now. She took a big interest in it, and then a good camogie came over there, but it's lost, losing out.
Oh, indeed.
She's
Indeed.
interested in the town and the camogie, except the convent kids.
Yeah.
No interest in hurling.
Yeah. Well, that going back again to the hall, you were telling me that it was an old church before he converted it into a hall.
It was an old church. They used to use it quite frequently before the church was built up there.
Which one? It wasn't an old Catholic church, no, was it?
It was Catholic.
Was it?
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
It was a Catholic church, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was always in the all that property belonged to the church.
Ah,
The school was built, and they're next to Fairgreen, then adjoins that.
yeah.
Church has the Fairgreen now. As a matter of fact, they bought it over there recently. He was getting the tech in Crossmolina.
Oh, yeah.
There was a new school built there while he was, a new boys' school built while he was here.
Oh, I see.
And he built a residence for himself next to the school.
Yeah. That's the Boys National School now you're talking about,
The
is it?
boys' national
Yeah.
school, yeah.
And did he get the tech built there too, or was there? Oh, that's right. So they didn't come into being until the last. When was it? The 50s or the 60s?
Around the 50s. The tech was built.
Yeah. He was involved in that too, wasn't
he?
he?
Was involved in it, yes.
Yeah. Well, as they say, he was involved in everything, wasn't he?
He was indeed.
Yeah.
And then he was involved in the setting up of the mart in Banma.
He was, yeah. And the NFA and
NFA and
farmers and meetings and whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
organised it.
Shirley Ward's chemist shop, Crossmolina, and the Marian Shrine, or the statue that Father Davis had erected in 1954 in honour of the Marian year while he was cured in Crossmolina. There was a pump there before that. The foundation of it is there, or the base of it yet.